All right, welcome back to the NJCAA Network and our Battles Won Leadership Series. I'm your host, Zach McKinstry, as we enjoy this partnership between the Marine Corps and the NJCAA, talking about the similarities between the two and the good that each provides. I'm here with Greg Sommers, the athletic director for Dallas College Northlake. And Greg, really appreciative that you could join us this afternoon, so thanks for your time.
Oh, no worries, Zach and Alexa. Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and thank you to the NJCAA. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Well, let's just jump straight into it. We'll start by asking what drew you to the Marines in the first place, as you're seasoned now in the Marines, been there for almost a decade now.
Correct. Honestly, the biggest draw was a family connection. My dad and my grandfather were both Marines, and you just kind of grow up seeing they were both very humble, but you could just see a pride they had being Marines and the way they carried themselves. It was just something different. Just being around it, it's kind of hard to explain unless you're around it and you see it. But that was a big factor. And then serving was always a big part of my life. I always wanted to serve. And I think that's probably what led me into the Marine Corps versus the Army or the Air Force or another branch, was just the family connection. So.
Yeah, and from your experience, which you have plenty of at the NJCAA level and with the Marines, as we talked about, what are some of the similarities you see between the two organizations?
Oh, definitely. Honestly, the chain of command kind of you see. So obviously, in the Marine Corps, you have officers, staff NCOs, and you're enlisted. You're younger enlisted. It's very similar in athletics. So your athletic director, like myself, would be kind of your officer, your administrator, your supervisor overseeing everything. Your coaches would kind of be like your staff NCOs, the senior leadership in the trenches with the student athletes or the enlisted Marines. And then obviously the younger student athletes are like the younger enlisted Marines. And then even at that level, you have staff NCOs, you have corporals that are leading, smaller teams of 4 or fire teams. It's kind of the same thing even at this level. You have team captains, so you have younger leadership. So I think the chain of command is obviously something. The structure is something you see very similar, and then a lot of the culture things you hear people say, the camaraderie, the lessons learned, from the being mentally and physically strong, and the adversity, overcoming adversity, facing obstacles, facing failure, things like that you hear all the time.
So you have worked up the chain of command in both areas. What have you learned from the Marines that has helped shape your coaching philosophy or leadership approach as an athletic director?
You hear this term a lot, and I don't want to throw it around, but it honestly is servant leadership. I think one of the first lessons I learned in the Marine Corps, actually a retired general, was a drinking buddy with my grandfather, told me, eat last. And at first, you're kind of like, eat last, what does that mean? But, make sure your troops and your Marines are taken care of, make sure they're well fed, well equipped. And it's the same thing as an administrator and athletic director. Make sure your coaches and your student athletes have what they need to succeed, make sure they're taken care of. So definitely the servant leadership mentality. And then obviously teamwork. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're at work, in athletics, Marine Corps, family, anything, you're going to have a team. That size could vary. It could be a fire team of 4, or it could be an athletic team of 40, or bigger. But you got to be able to work as a team. And even in our day-to-day jobs, we see that you're going to have a team. So yeah, there's a lot of things you do individually, even in athletics. There's a lot of things you do individually, but you've got to be able to play as a team. And I think a really neat thing about athletics in the Marine Corps is you get a lot of different backgrounds in both, especially in junior college and the Marine Corps. People from all over the world, all over the nation, all over the state coming together. And it doesn't matter. I mean, just picture, a unit of Marines moving, covered, full camo, face paint. You can't tell who's who. They all look the same. Same thing when athletes are in a uniform. If they're in a huddle on the football field and they all got their heads down, you can't tell who's who, minus their numbers, but they all look the same in the uniform. It's just a unit, that teamwork, that unit. It's so inclusive. And that's one thing I loved about it is that's where I met people, made friends, formed relationships just that inclusion that both have, that camaraderie. It's really what I've learned and has drawn me into both.
Is there a specific instance that you can think of where you applied lessons from the Marines to your teams at Dallas College Northlake?
Yeah, one of the big things I talk to the student athletes about is mental mistake versus physical mistakes. That's why you train. You train so hard in the Marine Corps because it's routine. You want to develop that muscle memory. Same thing in athletics. You want to develop that muscle memory, but you also got to know the game. You got to understand the strategy. You got to understand where the coach is coming from, your leadership's coming from. You got to understand the mission, because you don't want to make mental mistakes, because that costs. Good teams, good Marines, we're imperfect. We're humans. We're going to make mistakes, but you got to eliminate the mental mistakes. And that comes from training and studying and educating yourself and reconnaissance and intelligence. Get as much information as you can and form a plan, eliminate as much as you can, cut down on the mental mistakes. So that's one thing we talk a lot to the student athletes about is mental mistakes versus physical mistakes. Physical mistakes are part of the game. In baseball, you're going to strike out. Your ground ball is going to take a tough hop. You got to have short memory on those things. That's just part of the game. But if you're not in the right position, if you're supposed to be the cutoff and you're not there, that's something you can prevent from practice, training, studying. Just difference in those two, I think.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate your perspective, Greg. It's certainly a lot of valuable lessons that you just preached between both organizations, and thank you for coming on, and we're excited to see how you do with Dallas College Northlake in the upcoming year.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.